Good morning. I think I'm live. I'm about to sneeze, so bear with me. I'm going to mute my microphone a minute. Hang on, guys. Okay, you guys are going to bear with me today. I tell you what, my allergies are driving me wild. My nose is raw. I feel like I've got a winter cold or something. Oh, I was just complaining to my wife. My bad leg is just driving me crazy the last couple of days. Spasms and it feels swollen and just uncomfortable, and it's probably not it. I don't know, it's any more swollen than usual. Anyway, there's that. Good morning, Chuck. Good morning, Tina. Good morning, Carol. John, if you're out there listening, buddy, good morning to you. Be safe on the road. John and some of our other Disney World friends are all on the way to Philadelphia, I think, to gather up somewhere there and have lunch or some such thing as that. Good morning, Mr. Zorns.
Good morning, Mr. Pruitt.
How are you, sir?
I'm just as fine as frog's hair. And that's fine.
That's fine. Mighty fine, that frog hair is.
Sorry I was a little late.
You're not late. You're fine. We were just saying good morning. I just got on. I was just sitting here bemoaning the fact that I'm getting old and my nose is running and my leg hurts.
Well, of course.
Hell of a combination.
We would, pain is the thing that tells you that you're still alive.
That's a good point. I'm kind of tired of it sometimes. Black tree, no, gray tree frog, Tina. Gray tree frog.
Gray tree frog. So gray tree frog has particularly fine hair.
Particularly fine hair. And Mark, by the way, Tina, on that frog sound that you sent me the other day, Mark agreed with me that was a gray frog.
That was a gray tree frog.
We had, did you guys did Kimmer or anybody do fireworks out your way yesterday?
Oh, there was stuff going off everywhere. My border collies were freaking out, but at the same time, it was pouring down the rain.
Oh my!
Which we needed some moisture.
You did.
So we're happy with that part. But yeah, it was.
Morning, Diana.
I'm not sure if the Kimmer show went off or not. They were tarping up all the fireworks when we saw them.
Strange thing happened here last night. Well, strange. I think strange. A little bit strange. Off in the distance, I could hear explosions. Couldn't see anything, but I could hear the echo down
explosion.
Up the valley, you can hear it echo. And then I tried to look out over the ridge and I couldn't see anything from downtown. But then the neighbors right here in front of us had a little fireworks display in their yard. But then there were the sporadic boom booms, around it, because everybody around here has to stop at the corner market and get some fireworks for 4th of July. But about midnight, I don't know, between 11 and midnight, somewhere off to the west of us just a little bit. And actually, there's a racetrack that as the crow flies, it's probably a couple of miles from here. By road, it's 4 or 5. But I don't know if it was there or if it was really just neighbors. But somebody had some really big boomers and big, impressive fireworks last night going off down the road. And we started seeing the flash in the window, and then boom, it rattled the windows a little bit. And I got up once and looked down that way, and they were very colorful fireworks. It was whoever. It makes me think it was something bigger than just somebody's house, but maybe somebody spent a lot of money on fireworks this weekend.
Our nephew spends probably more on fireworks than the city of Kimmer, and he always kind of outclasses them. And of course, he's shooting at all the neighbors' houses and whatever. And
that sounds
but we don't live in Kimmer. We live in little old Powell, and they were cracking away till at least midnight. Boom, ba boom, ba boom, boom.
Was, or just
yeah. I mean, our little 63-person community.
That's because everybody in town has to try to outdo everybody else.
They were cracking away till midnight, at least. They might have gone beyond midnight. I don't know that for sure, but I finally fell asleep. They were booming. They boomed for a little while, and then it started raining. Or started raining again, because it had rained before they started. And then they got after it between like 9 and midnight.
Well, I don't know for sure if Rogersville did some last night, but I think Jonesboro is doing theirs tonight. And
and that's what my father told me. So he went to Jackson on the 3rd. They were doing all their fireworks on the 3rd. And then Oak Hill was going to do their fireworks on the 4th. And Wellston, the other little town in that county, was going to do theirs on the 5th. So
that way everybody got to go see everybody's.
That way you can go, everybody can enjoy the whole chittery.
I don't know. These down the road, we were sitting watching TV, and we started seeing the flashes and the booms, and we just didn't pay that much attention. And Teddy was sitting on my lap, and Teddy he don't care. There's not a lot bothers him, honestly, except somebody knocking on the door. That scares the crap out of him. But poor little Chloe, she runs and hides at the first anything it even sounds like thunder or a boom or anything. So, I finally got up and I said, I got to figure out how poor those are at. And I looked down the road, and they were some of the most colorful, sparkly looking fireworks I've ever seen. And I've seen some fireworks now. I've been to Disney World a couple of times, and they have a really impressive 4th of July fireworks. These were different. These weren't just red, white, and blue. These were like very multicolored. They were just different. So I don't know who they were, but somebody spent a couple of dollars on.
Looks like Christmas lights.
Kind of like Christmas lights.
That's what our nephew, when he buys fireworks, he goes all out, and he spends way a lot of money.
It's not hard to spend a lot of money on
because his daddy is a wealthy man, and he has wealth available, and he
one should use it, I guess, if one has.
His fireworks display from his house, and he lives up high on the hill, like at the top of Kimmer. His display is almost always way better than the cities.
Well, two things there. If you get one,
and then he attacks certain houses and things.
He declares war. Well, because, if you got money,
you live in a town of 1,500 people.
Well, there you go.
You're going to have some folks you don't necessarily like that much.
True. Well, if you've got money and you live on the highest hill in town, you might as well show off a little bit. I mean,
he does a good job of that. But yet last night, I think he was actually in Bear Lake in Utah, for God's sake, for crying out loud.
What was he doing down there?
I don't think he was even home.
He might. Well, you may still have more fireworks to come then.
The city was. We went into town and ate beautifully done ribs with our oldest son-in-law. The youngest son-in-law and the daughter were in Utah. Philip, my nephew, was in Utah. I don't know why you would go to Utah ever, but
anyway,
sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to fly on an airplane.
True.
But they were both gone. Jonathan made these beautiful ribs. We went into town and got to spend time with Sammy and Jess and John and Jesse and all the part of the grandbabies and a whole bunch of other folks, and had a great time. And my wife mentioned when we left the house, when we left Jonathan's place, that I hope the Kimmer had tarped their fireworks because it was pouring rain. And they were up on the hill they shoot them from and looked like they had everything buttoned up. But I don't know if they ever did anything.
Well, they may do them tonight or something then.
But when we got home to Opal, which is 15 miles away, they were shooting a few off, and then they stopped because it started raining again. And then about, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, they started firing them off again, and they shot them till midnight, as far as I can tell. Maybe 1 o'clock. I don't know. I went to sleep.
Why does that sound like a bad pickup? I missed it a minute ago, Carol. Why does that sound like a bad pickup line? Your hair is finer than a great tree frog. Now, depending on where you're from, Carol, if you're from East Tennessee in the mountains, you're a hillbilly. That might be a pretty good thing to say to somebody. Apparently, Carol and Diana both are saying they need rain, or at least, yeah. So you can't spare much of your moisture, but Tina's.
We only get 7 to 12 inches a year, so
you ain't sharing.
You ain't getting any of ours.
And then she also wanted to say, she made a comment about that firework display over town, that she figured people either love that or hate it. And I'd say there's a
believe me, I know a lot of them, and it's like one or the other completely.
Oh, me. Anyway, it was an interesting sort of evening for us.
Some people go back to the Nam over that deal.
Well, interesting thing. I heard a guy yesterday that I've listened to occasionally online that's got a YouTube program, and he said, and he lives somewhere in Texas, and he said their town wasn't doing fireworks this year, or maybe he wasn't doing any because of neighbors that were had some vets in their area that were sensitive to it, so they weren't doing any. That and the dogs went nuts, he said, but it was.
And I use that term loosely. You might go back to Afghanistan, or you might go back to Iraq, or I mean, I know way too many guys that, like, when that starts happening, they got to like curl up in a ball somewhere.
Yeah. I don't think I ever told you this story, but when I was in high school, probably before I ever met you, in fact, because I don't know if you guys had moved to Tennessee then, but anyway, I hung out at Decker's all the time. My airplane and my private connection, and
I remember that guy.
Yeah, can you remember the guy that went under that I told you about going under the car? Yeah, we were all standing down there one day. It wasn't on 4th of July, I don't think. It was just some random day, and somebody up the road threw out a pack of firecrackers just in their yard. Our kids were.
Yeah.
And everybody gets to looking around for this guy, and he's gone. And he was just back from Nam. And he was, we finally found him. Hell, he was under a car. And that's no joke. I mean, he was gone.
Well, so my dad went to manpower school when I was a little boy. When he got out of the Marine Corps and went back to school to become a machinist.
Yeah.
And there were like 5 vets in that class that had been in combat, and I don't even know what was happening. There was something going on next door that they were breaking down something or doing something. And those guys, like, were under their desks, and, like, including Dad, like, that sound happened and they went under their desks.
All of them.
And I remember the powder magazine blowing up at Friendship that one year.
Yeah.
And there were veterans all over the primitive area that were like hunting a hole.
No, I'm sure there were.
I mean, it was just instantaneous. Like, they heard that noise, and I think, and so Shauna and I went to the Marine Corps birthday ball with Dad and Mom. I don't remember how long ago it was now. Maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And somebody came in with a bunch of balloons, and the change in pressure it was cold outside. It was November. And the change in pressure from outside to inside, they brought in all these balloons, and they just started cooking off. And Dad and a whole bunch of other dudes were like immediately under tables and things. And I'm like, that's bullshit.
That lasted a long time for those guys.
It was 40 years after the deal. Yeah. And they're still like diving under desks. And
when I went to A&P school, half the people I went to school with were vets because they were all there on the GI Bill. They were all out of Vietnam, and they were there on the GI Bill going to airplane school.
Right.
They were pretty jumpy around loud noises around the shop. Something had happened and something had fallen, smack, and half the people in the place were gone.
Like, it was out like.
And I'm not making fun.
I'm not. I'm dang sure not making fun.
Was it your dad?
It's an awful thing that humans do to each other.
Was it your dad that you woke up as a kid and he about came off the bed and?
Oh, he killed me. He would have killed me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like was touching him like, hey, Dad, it's time to get up. He was working night shift or something. And I went over and like, Mom's like, go wake your dad up. It's time, he needs to get up. And he was working nights, I think, at the machine shop. And I just like, hey, Dad, like, just shook him a little bit, and hey, Dad, and he had me by the throat. And from then on, I woke him up with a broom handle. It don't take you long to learn what you got to do.
I had my scoutmaster. The guy I've talked a little bit about him before. Took me deer hunting for the first time actually, and he was he had been in the airborne. He was like the smallest guy in his outfit, and they said, "Who wants an automatic weapon?" And he said, like he raised his hand, and they handed him a BAR.
Here's 200 pounds you got to carry now.
Yeah. Anyway, he said when he told us one time, because we were camping trips and things, and people talk about just pretty much every father I knew in Scouts was a vet at some level, some time period, some war. And Bob said when he was in, one of the things they taught them, it's, hey, is that Wolfie?
It's Ursus horribilis teeny tiny ensis.
Teeny tiny ensis. But anyway, they told him that you couldn't wake they told them, they warned them about waking people up. And they said, but there was a case or something where they said the military said, if you wake up somebody the wrong way, whether they be an officer or an enlisted man could come off his bunk and throttle somebody pretty much, and they couldn't do anything about it if they didn't obey certain rules as far as waking them up, because that was just not the wrong people. You just didn't do that, and they tried to be sensitive about it.
My buddy that I got to go visit on Tuesday, he played football for the University of Wyoming in the early 70s. He was a quarterback, 6 string, 8 string. I don't know which string he was.
Which string he was.
He didn't get a lot of playing time, but one of his teammates had just got home from Vietnam, was a SEAL.
Oh my. And
they lived in a team house, like probably a big old, I'm sure debauchery happened there, like at a major scale.
No.
But he just got home from Vietnam, and I don't know how many tours he did or anything, but he was a SEAL, and he told all of his teammates, like, if I'm twitching around when I'm asleep, do not touch me, because I'll kill you before I'm even awake.
It's scary. It's scary.
And I mean, that's what it does to guys.
It's somebody, Carol said it's hard. It's we talk about it, and some of these guys that I've known, will kind of make jokes about it, but it's serious. I mean, it can be pretty
bad. A heart attack. It's serious.
I mean, your dad was. I remember your dad being jumpy like that just in my time after I met him, and he'd been out for quite a while by then. And like I said, my buddy Joe,
he hit me so hard one day. He was sleeping in a rocking chair in Montana. Oh, no. We were living in Montana at the time, which we went there.
Not debauchery. Tina wants shenanigans, not debauchery. She's
shenanigans. But we went there because, like, he was out. Like, we'd been home for a while, and he, like, I got to go somewhere where it's calmer. So we went to Montana, and Dad was asleep in the rocking chair, and some friends of his came by our place, and I went in just like, hey, Dad, like, I just like, hey, Dad, like, he was asleep. and he hit me. That's the hardest I've ever been hit in my life. And it was just like instant, like, you know, he wasn't awake yet.
Yeah, it's a scary thing.
It does bad things to a human being.
I can't imagine how.
And
Well, when did he get?
they just need to all come home.
Yeah, well, that's true. When he was either getting out. He told me this once. He was either getting out or was out when Kason was happening.
No, he stayed in 2 years after Kason.
But he didn't go back to Nam, though, did he?
Yeah, oh yeah. Right after Kason, he went back to Vietnam.
Okay, but he wasn't.
So he rotated home from his first tour, and then Kason happened.
Okay,
but the fellows were, you know, guys he served with.
Right, that's what he told me. Yeah,
and they had like 90% casualties.
Yeah,
so yeah,
it
wasn't any good.
Anyway,
but I didn't even mean to. I don't know how we even got on this.
Oh, talking about fireworks and how they affect different people different ways.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's one thing when they send your dog under the bed, but it's another when they send your dad under the car. So
exactly.
So anyway, all right.
You know, and my dogs last night, we got home from Kimmer, and I got a bad back door that doesn't always close good. And the winds were up, I'm sure, when the storms came through, and the back door was wide open. And when we got to the house, it was dark, and we were greeted by 5 dogs.
Oh, outside and waiting on you?
Outside. No, they come running down the driveway, and I'm like, we're like, how are they out? And I don't want to run anybody over. And anyway, we got them back in the house, and they were all just sopping wet. And it's like, well, couldn't you? The door was wide open. They could have got right back in the house.
But no, they wouldn't want to do that.
They were soaking wet, and nobody was and fireworks were happening, and nobody was upset, really. Even the border collies, and they don't like. Border collies do not like fireworks typically. I know. I have friends that live 5 miles east of here, that when the fireworks going off in Opal,
their border collies hide.
Their border collies disappear for like 2 or 3 days.
And then you got I don't know about your Vizsla, but probably a gunshot.
Oh, she's just like whatever. She was sitting in the yard. She's the only one that wasn't out running on the driveway.
Maybe she's figured out the money ain't worth it.
She's just like whatever. That's just like probably people killing grouse.
Okay, couple of things of housekeeping I want to do. I'm going to do the show a little differently. I don't know if you saw the email. Maybe you did.
I got the email.
I'm gonna read through some stuff because I want to kind of cover it all, and then we're going to just start. Then we'll just talk about while we're here, or while we're doing this today, or part of what we're doing today. And but I want to go over that first because I've done, since we talked the other day, I've done a lot of studying, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. But so anyway, so without further ado, I want to do another couple of things here because of the weekend and the occasion, and I have been derelict of my duties a little bit. So I wanted to hide that, and I'm going to do this because I have copious notes, and I'm by God going to use them today. And try not to lose them as I'm going along. I finally figured out where they hide sometimes. Now I figured that out. But I wanted to. Okay, got to take care of that. Can you read that better? Did I already do that so you could read it? I think I might have changed that last week.
Can you turn off the deal at the bottom?
What are you?
Well, there's a comment that's blocking half the.
Oh, I thought I did just block. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay.
It was from Tina.
Gotcha,
there you go. Now we can see it.
See, I couldn't see that. I didn't see that was still on. I apologize for that, folks. Anyway, all that usual housekeeping business. We got Morris and his brother shooting at bunny rabbits again here.
But they're missing him.
We missed him.
They didn't get any meat out of that deal.
No. But I forgot to tell Diana and Mike happy Canada Day last week or this week. Let's see, it was the first of what was that, Wednesday? No, Tuesday.
Oh, July 1st is Canada Day?
Canada Day. Yeah, I didn't know that for most of my life. I didn't know that. In fact,
I didn't know that until just now.
So I believe if my math is correct, and Diana, you're more than welcome to correct me. I do Tennessee math. It's your 158th birthday, oh Canada. And I spelled Canada wrong. Good God.
Canada.
Canada. Oh, Canada. Oh, Canada. So anyway, happy birthday. And then, of course, it is our 249th birthday this year. Next year will be 250. And I hadn't thought about that much. You know, my favorite 4th of July ever, and it was because of how attached I am to history, was 1976, because that was the 200th anniversary of the country. I don't know if 250 will be a big deal or not. I figured I wouldn't see 300. So, maybe I'll at least get to see something on the 250th. And my favorite thing about that's in my mind locked in was Walter Cronkite doing the parade of tall ships in New York Harbor. I just always remember Walter Cronkite doing that. So anyway.
So how is it that we're that old and Canada's only that old?
Well, here's the deal. And let me back up because I actually have notes on that. The reason is, you know, Canada was a common part of the Commonwealth, or part of France and then England, and they more or less got their independence, if you will, through the British North America Act of 1867, or also known as the Constitution Act, and that's when Canada declared, became a free and independent country. They were still part of the Commonwealth, correct? I think they may even still be part of the Commonwealth. But so that's why they claim to be 158. If you count from when they started settling parts of Canada, they're at least as old as we are, maybe older. But
older, probably.
Yeah, if you think
about it. Wasn't that a timely question?
Huh?
I said, wasn't that a timely question? You have the answer right there now.
Yes, right there. And there's John. John, welcome in, buddy.
We didn't even practice this.
No, we didn't. We hadn't practiced this at all. The bicentennial year was really cool because all the men. Oh, Brenda, that more than that, you may not remember this, but Johnson City celebrated, I believe, their 100th birthday. Might have been the same. It was either in 76 or a year or two before or after. So a lot of the men that grew beards, Johnson City did a beard contest. My dad grew the one and only beard I ever remember him having for that event, and he kept it for a while. So during the bicentennial, a lot of men had beards. I took a lot of pictures of men that I knew when I was.
He was sporty. He was sporty. He looked good.
Oh yeah, but what was weird about my dad's beard, and Brenda might remember this. He
said he looked really good in the beard, dude.
He did, but it was black on both sides, and white down the middle. And this was when he was in, in his 30s or 40s. It just had a streak right down the middle, a skunk stripe.
I can sympathize with him until here of late. Now it's just kind of all white, but
yeah, I know. I can empathize.
It used to have stripes in it, but now it's just kind of.
Yeah, mine's got streaks in it, but they're not that kind of streaks. So anyway, there we go. Now, what we're going to talk about, Mark and I have talked about this a little bit before, and we were talking about it the other day, and I thought, now what, this would be a good time to do this. I mean, you could talk about 4th of July stuff till hell froze over, but this is a little bit more unique, and I think I'm going to try to do this more often. So maybe I need stories if anybody else has family stories about this sort of thing. But we're going to talk today. I'm kind of doing this show in honor of the 106th. Excuse me, the 106th Infantry.
Turn the comment off, buddy.
Can I do what?
Turn the comment off.
Did I leave a comment on again?
Yeah, at the bottom of the page, it's blocking out the page. There we go.
I've got it covered up, so I couldn't see it. I apologize. Let's try this all over again.
I'm sorry.
No, I didn't see it. I would have taken it down. I didn't realize I'd left it up there. I'm putting my notes up over it. See, I'm bragging about using my notes, but it's hiding the screen. We're going to talk about the 106th Infantry Division and their role in the Battle of the Bulge. And this has an important stuff from Mark's family, and we'll explain all that in just a minute. And this plaque, I put this plaque on here because this is something that was put in after the war. And it was, I'll just read it. Memory of the officers and men from the 106th Infantry Division who fought in the Battle of the Bulge, many of whom were captured after exhausting their means to resist when surrounded in the Schnee Eifel region. Notice how I said that. I've been looking up words.
Schnee Eifel.
Schnee Eifel. I looked that up. I studied. I've practiced on some of these words. and during actions.
It's Son Beef.
Okay.
Belgium, well, that's how the Belgians would say it.
Yeah, well, that's true. But then again, they're like the French. They say everything funny. In December and January, 44 and 45. Sometimes I just can't control my mouth. Funny. I grew up in a town. Oh, wait a minute. What's Tina saying? I'm going to block the screen a minute. I grew up in a town named Floyd. It was William Floyd's plot of land awarded to him. Oh, cool. For being a general in the Revolutionary War, and was also signed the Declaration of Independence. That's interesting, Tina. And someday I need to talk about that a little bit more, because there's also a place in Virginia called Floyd, and they have this big reunion about people that go back to that city town of Floyd every year. Phil has read. He's told me about it several times. And I bet it was, Tina. The bicentennial up in your part of the country should have been a huge deal. I mean, it kind of was down here too, because of the Over Mountain Men and all the stuff that happened during that part of the Revolution. But I'm sure in the Northeast, I can't imagine all the things that were going on up in that part of the country, and should have been, for that matter. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I've taken copious notes. I've read some articles, and I've got a bunch of stuff written down, and I'm going to just go ahead and have let me see if this is it. No, I have a link here in a minute. I'm going to have a link I'm going to put in the chat, and but this article I've taken from an article. Most of this came from an article that was written for the World War II Museum, and so it's authenticated but I've read, it also depends on whose version you read about it. So while all the facts seem to line up and everything's the same, it's just kind of how the telling of it, if you will. But so let's go. I'm just going to get down to brass tacks here and cover this part. So the 106th Infantry Division was a division of the United States Army that served in World War II. two of its three regiments were overrun and surrounded in the initial days of the Battle of the Bulge. In other words, I think December 18th, 19th, or 19th and 20th.
19th and 20th.
Yeah, the division was never officially added to the troop list. This I thought was weird. Following the war, despite having been almost completely organized in Puerto Rico by 1948, so they moved the headquarters to Puerto Rico in 48, and they were nicknamed the Golden Lions. They were involved in battles in the Rhineland, the Ardennes, I always say that wrong, Central Europe. And the reason they were still there is a lot of these men were captured in those initial 2 or 3 days. But there were 3 divisions, and 2 of them were captured, and one of them, because it was still in the rear, was not part of the initial. Did somebody say something funny, or is that me?
No, I'm just reading Tina's
about turning in the wind.
About Danny.
I meant to ask how Danny was doing. I'll have to do that in a minute. So anyway.
Seems like he's pretty good.
So bear with me, and I'll get through this, and then we'll talk. It'll be much more interesting when we start talking. So this is all from an article by Robert Centino. He's a PhD in the War College kind of person, and it's called "The Fall of the Golden Lions." And here is that. Come on. Here's that. I'll post this link in a minute. You guys can't post it. You can't copy it. So the first German shells, and this starts out kind of like if you were reading a story, a book or whatever. It's at 5:30 on Saturday morning, December 16th, 1944. American troops atop the ridge known as the Chêne Eiffel weren't expecting this. I'll explain that in a minute. They'd just been on the front a few days, and they were relieving the 2nd Infantry Division in the Ardennes Forest, a sector of the front so quiet and uneventful that the GIs had started calling it the Ghost Front. It was a perfect place for a green unit like the 106 to get acquainted or acclimated to the rigors of life in the field and other routine stuff they had to get ready before they actually went into combat or pulled what they thought was going to be before they jumped off. But now, as the Germans suddenly opened up with everything they had, and everything I've read about this basically says this is true, the Germans, everything from every mortar they had to their 16-inch rail guns, started blasting away at these guys and everything around them. And the Ghost Front didn't seem quite so peaceful. And this was the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. The Golden Lions didn't know it then, but they were about to be plunged into what this gentleman refers to as one of the worst disasters in U.S. military history. And from one perspective, that's true. Not a disaster as far as what happened and who did what exactly, but just the fact that it did happen. And it happened for it was almost like the perfect storm. So after the end of the war, there was a false impression that, when we went into Europe and once we joined up or all the Allied stuff did, we just hit Normandy and then marched through France and Belgium and into Germany and just, nothing was ever a problem. But that is far from the truth. Nothing ever goes that way, especially not in war. And the 106, what happened to them changed a lot of things about how they were done the rest of the war and in later years. But they were completely caught by surprise. The men of the 106 did what soldiers in such predicament have done from time immemorial, depending on their precise location and post. At the moment they tumbled out of bed, they ran into each other, they shot all kinds of crazy things. They couldn't get their vehicles started because they were all froze up. Their Jeeps wouldn't turn over. And according to some people's recollection, they just, they were just like shooting into the wind. That nobody knew where everything was coming from. Their officers from the divisional commander, who was General Allen W. Jones on down, they never did quite get a real control over everything. Now, that's debated because some say they did kind of pull it together. It's not. they pulled it together to the point where they realized there wasn't anything they could do. It was too late, and not because necessarily anything they did wrong. It's just that the Germans were that overwhelming. They never did get their troops under control, and the result, complete lack of cohesion and all that. Blah blah blah. Writing in 1949, the division's official historian, at least at that time, Colonel R. Ernest Depew, he referred to it as panic. And let's get down to hard facts. Panic, sheer unreasoning panic. This is his quote. Flamed that road all day and into the night of December 16th. Everyone, it seemed, who had any excuse, and many who had none, were going west that day. They were trying to get the hell out. They were trying to get back across the river in many cases. This group of the 106th were the only troops that were stationed east of the Rhine at this point. So they were kind of out there on a limb in more ways than one. So that was poor planning on somebody's part right from the beginning. And these two examples I've taken from one, this same article that was in the museum. And while none of these soldiers have an identifying mark, it says they were with the 106. Everything I've looked at and read leads me to believe most of these guys were in the 106, because there were nearly 7,000 of them who were captured. The Germans, they never actually assaulted the 106 directly, at least not at first. But what they did was they encircled them. They were actually going around the Schnee Eifel, because they were trying to get to another place. And the Schnee Eifel basically means a snowy hill, just to be real rough about it. But it was a ridge line that had snow on it. I think maybe even have been some ski resorts there at one time. And not high mountains, but a high area above everything else. But there were basically valleys on both sides, and that's where the Germans were actually going around to get behind it to Saint-Vith or Saint-Vith, whatever, and then going on to Antwerp. Their whole mission was to get to Antwerp. They wanted to get to the coast so they could start and get resupplied themselves. One of the big mistakes I think that was or a misconception of, is that the Germans were just defeated. What the Germans were at this point were out of supplies. They were running out of materiel, but they still had an army full of really highly trained soldiers who knew what their job was. So, that was sort of a misconception on a lot of people's part. And a lot of people refer to this as the last gasp of the Wehrmacht, which is Hitler's army. And let me catch up. Open terrain of the Loschheim Gap, which is on the north side of Schnee Eifel, which would have been on the north side of the 106th. And the other problem is there was one small mobile unit of artillery, or mobile cavalry, actually they referred to at the time, and they were just completely overwhelmed as the Germans came through. So that opened up the 106 flank. So it was just easy to surround. It was just easy to surround them. The rapid link up between these two pincers, they encircled the whole thing. The 422nd Division, or not division, these would have been brigade or battalion, and the 423rd.
422nd Regiment.
Regiment.
And the 423rd Regiment were east of the river.
Right, and the 424th was the group that was still in.
They were at Saint-Vith.
Yeah, they were a little bit safer than these guys were. Anyway, now they were surrounded, out of contact, because that's what happened when the Germans made this initial dawn attack. One of the reasons they were blasting away with every piece of artillery they had was they completely disrupted communication. So these guys were literally cut off. And
didn't have any food.
So what should you do? They were surrounded, out of contact with everybody, and cut off from supplies. That's a really important factor here. And they would eventually surrender en masse on the orders of the regimental commanders on Tuesday, December 19th, day 4 of the German operation. And at that time, it was considered and may still be technically the most severe reverse of, biggest surrender, I think, of the U.S. Army, I believe. The what was bad enough, but getting at the why was been much more difficult because there's been all kinds of reasons and excuses given. But basically what it amounted to was these guys were green in the field, but there was really an underlying factor. They'd been training in the States since, I believe, 42 or 43, the March of 43. But as recruits some of the recruits had improved, had moved up in rank, and had experience or really, gotten a good grip on everything they were being taught. A lot of those guys got picked up and sent to the front to replace units that were over there fighting, or replacement troops for the different groups that were already over in Europe fighting. So that meant that the 106 had like 60% of their allocated strength or allotted strength were new guys. Not that they were bad new guys, but they were not very well, they weren't trained very much. So that really was one of their weaknesses. And when they did this reallocation of men, they had people that were from, like had like 1,100 air cadets, guys that were either taken out of the air wing of the U.S. Army, because it was in the Air Force, was not Air Force, it was the Army Air Corps then. Either these guys had maybe washed out as pilots, or they just decided they didn't need them. There were 1,500 others that were just stationed around the country in different units. 2,500 were from various disbanded units that had been broken up and used for other things. So they just were just a hodgepodge of troops being brought in, and then trying to train them how to work together and bond and, become not synchronized unit, but a group of people that knew how to work together and fight cohesion or cohered or whatever together to work. They just didn't get a chance to do that. And so they were kind of what had been referred to as an assembly line division. And there were a lot of raw draftees thrown together and a handful of experienced and inexperienced officers. Some experienced NCOs, but not that many. Most of their high-ranking officers were not that experienced. In fact, I'm not sure any of them had been in combat. Not that necessarily is why this happened. Again, it was one of those things that was the perfect storm. But the fact that they hadn't been together very long and didn't have a history together and all that sort of thing, that didn't help matters at all. And next slide. And these photographs, all these photos are authentic Battle of the Bulge. What's going on? I mean, equipment was just left sitting. And one of the reasons, another thing I forgot, basically, if you ever saw the movie Patton, George Patton's Third Army they basically were marching through southern France towards Germany, and he was told to stop because they were running out of supplies. And the truth of the matter is, the whole Allied forces had moved east so quickly that they had to overrun their supply lines. So these guys were way out front, and they were completely cut off, and supplies hadn't caught up with them yet. And one of the reasons they were there trying to do what they were doing was get settled in and get supplies up to the front lines before like I said, the battles that were to come. And again, this picture, while it didn't say these were necessarily 106, it was an example given of part of what had been going on at that time. Go on what Pugh was saying earlier, but so many of the men had developed early, who first had shown an aptitude or had already graduated up to like private first class or higher. Those men were pulled out of the 106 and distributed out amongst other units, other divisions, other regiments, and that's and then they were replaced. And he said it wasn't that the new guys that they were getting were inferior. It's just that they hadn't had a chance to be trained. And none of them had worked together in a combat situation. And let's see here. Let me catch up. I'm not going to read every word of this. That was kind of out. But that was kind of how the Army did business back then. So to say this was totally screwed up just because the 106, again, was not true. It's just that everything came together for these guys to get really clobbered. But they didn't. They were a new unit. They hadn't been together long, and the unit themselves, the whole division, had not existed that long, since 42 or 43. And so anyway, so comparing them to like the Big Red One, for example, which was the first Army unit, they'd been together since World War I or before. And here these guys were thrown out into the field, and they were not just new, they were brand new. Let's see here about we catch up. Unfortunately, the 14th was one of the mobile cavalry units that I was talking about a minute ago that had mechanized artillery. They were sometimes you see vehicles in World War II that look like a tank, but they're not considered a tank. They're more of a mechanized cannon. Those kind of things were parts of these cavalry units. You had armored divisions that were primarily tanks, and you had mechanized or mobile artillery units that might have been considered cavalry at this point, because World War II came along and the cavalry units of the American Army had not been disbanded for very long. I mean, we still had cavalry units up until and after World War I with actual horses and mules and everything. So the 14th was on their north side, and they got whacked just right off the bat, which destroyed, so that exposed the 106th flank and just left them wide open. On top of that, because that 3rd Division hadn't been moved up yet, these two divisions had to cover something like 5 miles of frontage, which was not nearly the density that they normally would have covered. Again, just bear in mind, everything, perfect storm, everything's coming together or falling apart. And I won't be able to, you probably won't be able to see all this, but if you can see my cursor, basically how do you pronounce it? Sanvi is right down in this lower quadrant here where my circle is. You can't see it on here.
Bastogne is south there.
In Bastogne. I'm going to show you a better picture of that just in a moment, because I've got it on my next slide. I magnified it so you can see better.
And this was the spot that we got it. The Germans said we have to take this spot.
Yeah,
at Schoenberg, they needed this road network.
Well, that was right, and it was going to carry them right on up
to Antwerp. Yep.
And another factor I didn't realize, but this was also important to part of the German army, because this is also the same location where they had beaten the French army when in the first Blitzkrieg
this was the Blitzkrieg spot.
And so it was also important to them for that reason also. So they went through the Losheim Gap in like less than 48 hours, and by that point they had the 106 surrounded. The 28th Division was on the south side of the 106, which I believe is where the 5th Panzer Unit came through. The 6th Panzer Unit came around the north side of the 106. The 5th came around the southern side. And the 28th had once been part of what was the Pennsylvania National Guard. National Guard units are always important. A lot of these units were formed from previous National Guard units. And they had a distinctive logo because they had the Keystone Division, is what they call themselves, but the Germans had met them before in battle. So to think they weren't prepared is not true. It's just that they were so taken by such surprise, because the Germans actually referred to this Pennsylvania regiment as the Bloody Bucket Division because they had fought them tooth and nail before, and the U.S. troops in this case had come out on top. So the Germans were familiar with some of these troops, and there was a lot of recuperation. In this case, the 28th was sort of getting an R&R. They were supposed to be recuperating, resupplying, rebuilding, getting ready to move on into Germany. And finally, you can't just blame any one group or any one thing about this fight. I mean, there were so many factors, again, that came into this that it happened. I mean, I'm sure that there was plenty of blame that went around, but, you know, the truth of the matter is the Germans just by God surprised them. And they weren't prepared. These guys were green. They'd just been there just a few
5 days.
Huh?
5 days.
5 days. And as long as they'd been up there, that is no time to, I mean, that is not even time to get dug in good. And, you know, Jones, which was their primary commander, I think the general of that division, actually had a heart attack right in the middle of this, or at least what they think was a heart attack. I think it's been questioned by some after that maybe it was just, he just got sick, or that was polite fiction, as they put it back then. But basically, he had a heart attack right in the middle of all this. That didn't help matters any. And basically, all this just came together. You know, a lot of new troops in a new situation. They didn't have all their supplies in, and they were also right along the Siegfried line, which could have been an important thing, in that if they had been able to use the Siegfried line, which had been built by the Germans were using it to protect their border, but the French had also used it, I believe, at one time, or parts of it. And but I never thought of this, but all the defensive entrenchments and pillboxes and artillery that was built into the Siegfried line was pointing towards France, not towards Germany. So the Americans couldn't really use that to fight against the Germans because it was, you know, everything was going the wrong direction. And like I said, I talked about this a minute ago, that this was part of one of Hitler's greatest victories, and that's when they destroyed the French and took over and, you know, basically forced them to surrender. Let's see here. 24 divisions were ready to roll. That's how many, 10 panzer units. And these were some of the crack panzer units left in the war, like the SS Hitler Brigade. And these were crack troops that they sent in. Basically, Germany had gathered up all the best soldiers they had left and put them into this last-ditch effort.
Against guys that had never been in combat.
Against guys who had never been in combat. So this is
and they had 27 miles of line to watch instead of 5.
I think I've got a second picture of this. It's a little bit closer, but then within that circle is where we're talking about most of this was happening. I think you should be able to read. This says this is the 5th Panzer Unit. This is the 6th Panzer Unit, and see how they came across there. The 106 was in the middle of that, basically. Right about where my cursor is now is the Schneeapfel. So it was right along this ridge line here. And Saint-Vie is right here. And Bastogne, which is more famous than Saint-Vie, although Saint-Vie was just as important. But, you know, Bastogne is what most people know about, or have heard about, or read about. And of course, the Band of Brothers spent a fair bit of time talking about Bastogne. Virtually every battle of the Bulge movement that's ever been made that's been focused around Bastogne. But Bastogne was not the only most important town. It was just one of them.
Yeah, Saint-Vie was the one.
It was actually more important. Yeah, and it was. They've talked about they wanted Bastogne also because it was such a crossroads, but Saint-Vie was even more so. I mean, it was just a big deal.
Shorter distance to Antwerp.
Yeah, straight shot.
The whole deal, you know, they were like trying to split the Brits and the Canadians from the Americans and separate them out and force them back to the sea.
And on top of all that stuff, somehow or another, through various breakdowns of intelligence services and whatnot, basically Germany pulled this off in almost complete secrecy. Now, one of the reasons I've read that happened was because the air wing had been almost grounded for weeks because of bad weather in this area, so they weren't able to do a lot of aerial recon. But I read one article that said that the main intelligence officer who actually tried to tell everybody there might be something going on was Patton's guy, the guy who was running his G2 department. And but he wasn't getting a lot of traction up the line, so nobody was really listening to them at the moment. Let's see here if I got. So anyway, and then this next picture, there's San V, and you can kind of see the crossroads in that part of the map. And down here is Bastogne at the bottom. And if you look at these red lines, the ones that are just smooth red lines going east-west more or less, that's the 6th and the 5th Panzer Unit. So you can see that the 106th was right in here, and they were just completely surrounded. So one thing led to another, and after just a couple of days, they were just completely surrounded and cut off, and there wasn't a whole lot they could do short of surrender, which is what ended up happening in many ways. And Mark will explain this in a minute because he got a lot of this firsthand from his grandfather. That they were basically, they were afraid if they didn't surrender that they would just be annihilated, more or less. These pictures on this photo and this slide are just troops moving in. Some troops, German troops, obviously, that were part of this attack. Some of the prisoners marching off to, and there were, I already said this, but there were about 7,000
forsaken places.
Yeah. And now the next slide I got, Mark, I just threw this in here, and this is sort of an add to, but I didn't know this until yesterday. Look at that logo. That's an arm patch for a group. And this photograph is actual
National Guard.
The 117th Regiment of the Tennessee National Guard, which was part of, or still is, maybe part of the 30th Infantry Division. And they are actually based out of Knoxville now. That group, as they are, have been reorganized, of course, over the years. Interesting other factoid about them is I read, I don't know if it says it in this piece here, but they basically, this guard unit has been together in some form or another with the U.S. Army since the Revolutionary War. They have fought in every major war that the United States has been involved in since the Revolution, right up to whatever the last official one in Afghanistan was, which I thought was. And our former son-in-law was actually in. I don't know if I guess he was with this group, and they were with as a guard unit, and they were in. They were just in Iraq. I can't remember the forward operating base they were out of at that time. He was up towards the northern border, so up towards Afghanistan, but not in Afghanistan. So at that time, we were kind of glad he wasn't in Afghanistan, but they were still pretty busy. Oh, yeah, it says Tennessee has had participated in conflicts from the Revolutionary War to the Iraq War in 2010, up to as late as 2010. And that could have been when that article was written. But I thought that was interesting. The other interesting thing about this to me, and this is something I'm researching. I've been trying to find this information, but Mark had a grandfather that was in the Battle of the Bulge. I had an uncle that was in the Battle of the Bulge. One that I know of, and maybe more, but I've never been able to figure out who he was with. I still don't know what unit he's with, and there's a really good chance that he was with this group. Because, a lot of people back then, if they joined in a certain state, they ended up kind of being attached to the groups that were from those states. And like Mark's grandfather, when he signed up or when he went in, he was with a group that were out of the Appalachian area, southern Ohio, parts of West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, probably some of western Virginia, and West Virginia, I guess. And then I think there was a group out of southern Indiana, maybe as part of this too.
Southeast Indiana.
And so all those, so they tended, I mean, like Alvin York. So I've got the end here. It's not the end. It's merely where we're going to change speeds now. And I'm going to close that and say, now, I wasn't trying to steal the show, but I wanted to cover some of that. I know as a moderator, I don't like it. The last thing I want people talking just to talk. Oh, am I talking just, hey, Kay? So what got all this started was Mark has told me about this for years, but more in the last couple of years probably than before. But your grandfather was part of the 106, and he was one of the prisoners.
He was
by all means, step up.
Now, he was in the 423rd Regiment, one of the two regiments that was captured. They had been on that. They were the only unit in Germany. Literally, they'd been in combat for 5 days. They ran out of food, ammunition, and medical supplies, and their regimental commanders surrendered them. So the 422nd and the 423rd, largest surrender in U.S. history, actually.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Not just Army, but anybody. Their bosses said, I don't want to kill all you boys. So they had no ammunition, no food, no water, no nothing. Like, I'm surrendering us. And so, and the two different regimental commanders, 422nd, 423rd, they had no communication with each other. They both did it on the same day, same thing. And they loaded them. They walked them 40 miles to the east. They hadn't had food for 5 days at that point. They walked them 40 miles to the east, put them on rail cars that were built for livestock. You could hold 40 guys or 16 horses, I guess, is what they said.
Yeah,
and then they transported them east to the central part of Germany, or east central part of Germany. And while they were on their way to the east, they were in these livestock cars that you could hold 40 guys in. They'd put like 120 of them in there. So they couldn't even sit down. And the Brits decided, man, that looks like a good target for our airplanes. And so they attacked the cars. Because they thought they were moving troops, you know.
Which is right.
They were moving troops, but they were moving Allied troops, not German troops.
Another thing, and I think
they literally like broke out of the box cars and laid their blankets out on the ground in a big US.
Yeah, to try to keep.
And it saved their lives.
If I'm not mistaken, and you may have told me this, but I read somewhere that after the surrender, they basically marched these guys 4 days to the railhead, and within that 4 days, I think they got fed once, and then the same thing happened on the train. They shipped them another week or something. I don't know how long it took, and they got fed once during that time. So I mean, they were starved from the beginning. They were mistreated all the way. Which is
so Grandpa went in like 180 pounds, big strapping, you know, wood chopping lad. farmer kid, 180 pounds, probably all muscle. And then when he got home, he was 112 pounds. So
welcome in. And Dave and whoever else.
They took Grandpa to Muhlenberg 4B, which was one of their POW camps.
Which was a work camp, basically.
And Kurt Vonnegut, that wrote Slaughterhouse 5, he was also taken there. He was in
part of the 106.
I don't know if he was in the 106th. I don't know if he was in the 422nd or the 423rd. I think he was from Indiana originally. And he got pulled out of the camp, out of Muhlenberg, and taken to another camp somewhere outside of there where the slaughterhouse was at that he got to work in. And Grandpa stayed at Muhlenberg 4B the whole time. And they went out and they cut firewood for families or whatever. They did whatever they had to do, had work details every day.
Vonnegut was from Indiana, and they got Indianapolis.
They got 2 loaves of black bread a week for their house, and I don't know how big the loaves were or what black bread is. It doesn't sound good.
Well, it's basically pumpernickel. There's a couple different versions of it, but that's kind of a common bread in that part of the world.
And then when they went out on work details, the boys were picking dandelions as much as they could. And Grandpa would not, when he got home, he would not eat. You couldn't force a green down his throat. He wasn't going to eat spinach. He wasn't going to eat dandelions. He wasn't going to eat watercress, nothing. He was not going to eat a green.
And they were done that.
He was a 106 foot tall man that was 112 pounds when he got home. So
he's a beanpole by the time he got out.
Yeah. So when they liberated him, the Soviets actually liberated him. And then a U.S. Army unit came in shortly thereafter, but Grandpa always said that he was treated way better by the Germans than he was by the Russians. And when they shipped him back to, is there a fort in Florida called McCall?
I think so, and if not, there were several forts in Florida that no longer there.
So they shipped them back to Florida. When they liberated the fellows, they shipped them back to Florida, and they wouldn't let the family come see them until they got them healthy again.
Some meat on their bones.
Yeah, so I don't know how long he spent there, but I mean, you run completely out of food. So the commanding officer that you mentioned earlier, their communications were basically severed, but he managed to get somebody managed to get a communication through, and it was what do you boys need? They'd been out of food for 2 days, 3 days. Send us more ammunition. And they were fighting flipping Panzers with rifles.
Yeah, with M1 Grands.
Yeah. So
at some
point it's we all die or we don't die. That's how their commanders were looking at it. we're either all going to die or we're going to have to like surrender. And
yeah, they those camps, that particular camp, and
Muhlenberg,
yeah, was known for one, not being best condition. I mean, there were a lot of POWs died in that camp of just, and I'm talking about U.S., British,
and
not.
Grandpa talks like it was like I'm trying to think of the word. It was very cosmopolitan. There were Italians, not Italians, because they were on the same side. There were Czechs, Poles, Brits, Canadians, Americans, and Soviets in that
All in
camp,
that one
all
camp.
at that same time.
Well, another
He,
thing
he, he, he would use words that I'd never heard of, and he was like, "Oh, I learned that. I learned that when I was a boy."
oh crap, I lost my train of thought. Oh, one of the things that I didn't know about until a few years ago, and I'm again reading and watching documentaries about some of these camps, stuff that's come out that at the time they didn't talk about it. They wasn't even made public in a lot of cases. But the Germans were notorious for using slave labor forced labor during the war. They weren't supposed to, but they did. Not just Jewish slave labor. Everybody knows about that. But they also used any POWs they captured, like Americans or Brits, and they put a lot of them to work. And basically, one of the things that is it that camp you talked about, and they would take they would split them up. It was known. It's kind of like a camp. In your case, your grandfather stayed there, but a lot of them went off to other places to work.
Right.
They separated them, and lots of them never. I mean, they'd work them till they dropped dead. That's what it amounted to.
Yeah.
And so if you survived at all, was pretty lucky. He probably. This is going to sound ridiculous, but probably the best thing that happened to them in this case was that they got captured so late in the war.
Yeah, because they were POWs from December 1944 to I think they were finally like back in U.S. hands like May 5th or something like that of 45. So, yeah, some of those guys, some of those Brits and things had been in captivity for 5 years.
Yeah, I sure had.
Imagine that.
And some of those
they had, and it's cool to read some of the stuff. They had a newspaper that they produced at the camp. That was in multi languages, which was cool. I have a couple of those pages. Did
you bring those home?
But Grandpa was like, he was out like every day, like using a crosscut saw, cutting firewood, or he was working in gardens, slinging a hoe. Because that's what he did at home.
That's how he grew up.
But when you don't get fed anything,
yeah, it doesn't take long.
You just waste away,
I was reading about that a little bit more too, about the rules of war, if you will, and the Geneva Convention, which Germany had signed into, 20 years before this, and
they didn't follow very well.
Well, no, they didn't, and that was the point. But they were, it was part of the rules of the game, where if you had POWs, they could be used for certain types of labor, like they could be cooks, they could garden, they could do that kind of work to help feed themselves or whoever. But they weren't supposed to be used for other things like war production, which is what they got used for a lot. So by him staying there and working on the farm, so to speak,
was
probably lucky in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, because Vonnegut was in. I think they sent him to Dresden, and I think the slaughterhouse that he worked in was in Dresden, and he was there during the bombing and all that, nightmare.
The fire bombing and
yeah, when the Allies like bombed Dresden, I think Vonnegut was there cutting up cows or whatever,
feeding the German army, certainly not feeding.
Yeah, he wasn't feeding our people. He was feeding the Hitler Youth and whatever. Hardy, what was it? What's the guy on Atari? Hardy Kruger.
Hardy Kruger. Well, that's true.
He was a Hitler Youth.
Yeah, he
was a flipping SS guy that didn't like being that, but that's what he was forced into being. So,
Kay made a comment here. I want to speak to just for a minute. Kay, we think about Hogan's Heroes, and it was played at least to some degree as a comedy, which is kind of, when you think about it for a minute, that show came out in the 60s, I think, which is only 20 years after the war. It's amazing that they did it at all. But there were camps where a lot of the same kind of stuff was actually going on that were discovered. I saw pictures of one of these camps near where Mark's talking about, where they had tunneled, and they actually had they had built like mining cars in these tunnels. They were actually tunneling out of some of these camps. And so some of that wasn't entirely fiction, but it wasn't quite like it was in Hogan's Heroes.
Well, watch The Great Escape. That's a true story.
Yeah, that was about, exactly. And a few minutes ago, 2 hours ago, I probably could have told you what camp that was because I just read about that. But
it was an officer-only camp.
Yes.
Like the camp my grandpa was in I've seen hundreds of photographs of it, and it looks like my version of what hell looks like. There's no vegetation. It's completely, right. It's fenced around. It's rows and rows of huts and
like longhouses, and they were just
almost like longhouses, and it would have been like my version of hell. So
I didn't realize it either, but Stalag, when you hear about Stalag 17 from Hogan's Heroes, I think it was 17, wasn't it? Anyway, I was just reading. Stalag was actually an enlisted men's prison, and there were a whole series of one. But if the camp name started with Stalag, that was
13. Stalag 13.
13, excuse me. 17 is the one that was in the movie. But I don't know if I may still have that slide or that. Here it is. Stalags. And there's a list of them here. Which one did you say he was in? Was it 3A?
He was at Milberg 4B.
4B, okay. Where is this? I had the whole list.
And if you look it up, it never says 4, the number 4B. It says it's in Roman numerals.
Right.
IVB.
Stalag. Where did I just read that? It's right here in this page. Yeah, Dulag was a transit camp. Dulag Luft was supposedly for the Air Force. So if you were a bomber crew and you got picked up as a prisoner, you would have been in a Luftwaffe camp, which Stalag 13 was actually supposed to have been, was one of the Luftwaffe camps, actually. So there's like Marlogs and Millogs and Offlog and Stalag were enlisted personnel camps. And then there was Stalag Luft is a is another one, and I can't remember which one was there was merchant marine camps. Then wasn't there a story you told me about your granddad when they finally got out that they were near? Maybe I'm getting two stories mixed up. Didn't the Russians basically open the gates and they were just sort of?
Yeah, so the Russians liberated them. They came in there and ran the Germans off, cut the gates open, and then left because they were starving too.
Right.
I mean, those troops that opened that, and like I said, Grandpa always said that at least the Germans gave us a loaf of bread a week or whatever. And then one of my great uncles was actually in the same unit. He was there when the U.S. Army came in and picked the boys up. One of my great uncles was in that and didn't even recognize my grandfather. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Say that again. Something caught my attention. Say that again, please.
Well, I just said that one of my great uncles was actually there on the other side of the family, was there when they liberated Grandpa's camp.
Oh, okay.
When the U.S. Army got there, not when the Soviets,
not when the Russians got there,
not when the Soviets cut the gates open and kind of left them to their own devices.
Yeah.
One of my great uncles was there, and which is small world, I guess.
True.
And he didn't even recognize Grandpa. He was
so they knew each other, but he didn't even recognize.
He was so skinny, he didn't even recognize him. So,
wow, that's amazing. Well, like I said, I had an uncle.
If I wouldn't even be here.
True.
No, that's not true because Dad was already born, so I could have.
Oh well. Oh yeah, because he wasn't he?
Dad was already. Dale wasn't born yet, but Dad was. So.
Yeah, like I said, I had an uncle who was there also, but my uncle was, I don't know what all he did, and he survived. He managed to survive the Bulge, but he did fight in the Battle of the Bulge, and which is about all I ever got to talk to him about. So, I mean, he could have been part of one of these units. He was probably with this Tennessee group, maybe with the Tennessee group that was, fighting there along with these guys, or came along trying to retake the ground that they lost. But it was a pretty rough time.
Well, and one of the things that never gets talked about is that there was a artillery unit attached to the 106. So the 106 had never been in combat. They just got there 5 days. They'd been in Belgium for 5 days, literally, when they got captured, or shortly thereafter. And there was it's a 300 level artillery division.
Yeah,
we're all black men.
Oh yes, I know. I read about them too.
And a whole pile of them got captured at the same time. And I can't find anything about what happened with them.
Well, some of them got
knowing how the Germans treated people that
weren't white,
that weren't whatever, that weren't Germans.
Well, true. There was actually a group of them, and I think it was the same outfit. I read about them yesterday. They were tortured and killed, and
they killed a pile of them.
Yeah, and that officer was one of the ones that got executed after Nuremberg. He was tried at Nuremberg for that particular event. And
well, my grandfather's first name was Ira.
Right.
And of course, in Kentucky, you say that Ari. but I often wonder if they like. I mean, he was as Jewish as Ira Hayes. So I often wonder if they like, hey, your name's Ira. What's up with that?
Yeah.
But he never talked about that being a problem. But there were a lot of other problems. But
oh, sure.
But the fact he could never eat lettuce or greens anymore.
The rest of your life. Hey, Tony, welcome in.
You pass him the spinach, and he'd be like, "Get that out of my face, boy."
That's from a guy who probably grew up eating that kind of stuff too.
He ate dandelion greens every day of his life. During the summertime, or watercress or something like wild greens. We ate them all the time. Poke salad. He wouldn't eat any of that anymore.
Well, I can't say that I blame him. It was, Tina. I never thought about things like names, but and Carol, I hope everybody's slips are up to speed because I'm going to say something. I remember watching the books, The Wind of War, and one of the ways they identified they were a group of Americans that were captured or at least detained, trying to get out of Germany right as the war was breaking out, and basically the men were told to drop their trowel, and they were checking for circumcision, and if you were circumcised, they figured you were a Jew right off the bat,
right?
Even though it was common practice in the States at that time, and that was so. I mean, things like your name or whether or not you'd been circumcised at birth or whatever, those kind of things couldn't have placed you in the middle of a POW camp because or a concentration camp in that case, because different things were you. I mean, they looked at it different.
Well, they talk about how they took all the Jewish soldiers out of Grandpa's regiment and the other, the 423rd and 422nd.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to go to way worse places.
Yeah, and I wonder how many of them never came back.
Well, a lot of them survived, but barely. I mean, they were, where Grandpa come back at 112 pounds, they were like 80 or whatever,
They got used for things like, even worse things. The Germans were messing around with. Let's not pick on your Germanic relatives. My whole side of my family is Germanic, but they were doing things like making rocket fuel and synthetic fuels because they were out of petroleum based stuff, and a lot of those things they were making were so toxic that just to get it on your skin would kill you, and that's what they used prisoners of war for. They had them making stuff like that, especially if they were Jewish.
Yeah,
because they didn't care, and that just a lot of people died just from those kind of things. And I know they used, you see the jets and the early the Germans also had rocket planes that were literally rockets that used a liquid fuel rocket, not just a jet. They were a one-time deal. You lit them off, they went up, did their thing, came back down, and dead sticked in. The fuel that they used in those planes was so, like I said, so toxic that you couldn't even let it touch your skin. I mean, it was deadly. And so, that's the kind of thing you got to do if you weren't one of the chosen few. Again, I'm not trying to pick on them.
Humans great?
Do what?
Ain't humans great?
Ain't humans great? We certainly are.
we've been doing this to each other for as long as we've been around, and it's just not. I don't know why we can't just
get along.
To use a cliche, all just get along.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's
why too many of us if we did.
Yeah, well, that's probably true too. That's what I was saying a while ago. He was probably lucky that it was only 6 months left. Well, they weren't even in quite 6 months, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think he was at POW for 5, which was long enough.
Which was long enough, yeah.
Which I mean, again, he went from like 180-pound man to like 112 pounds. If it had been a year, he probably wouldn't be here. Wouldn't have been here because he's not here now. He's with me.
Is that his chair you're sitting in?
Pardon?
Is that his chair that you sat in that you have at your
table? No, that's my way older grandfather. Okay. That was born in the 1890s.
Okay.
That's whose chair I'm sitting in. Mom's dad.
Yeah, Mark said he's got his grandpa chair there at his table, which is only his chair. I knew it got passed down.
This is my chair.
His chair. So that chair is over 100 and something years old then, 150-ish?
I think so. Mom had it sitting out on the porch, and she was getting ready to like tell Dad to haul it to the dump or throw it in the burn pile or do whatever with it. It's hickory. It's a handmade hickory chair.
No wonder it's still there.
And there's parts of it that are missing, and there are parts of it that were loose that I fixed with rawhide and brass tacks.
Only Mark would have a chair.
And I said, you are not going to throw that. You're not getting rid of that chair. I'm taking it back to Wyoming with me. So I sit in it every day.
Yeah, I've seen it. I can attest to that. So anyway, this show was basically in honor of Mark's grandfather.
I appreciate that, buddy.
In the 106th Infantry Division, which is a group that for the most part you don't hear anything about.
There's a few YouTube videos. You can go on. You can go on the YouTube and you can video. You can. There's a kid in Belgium. Young man, not a kid.
I just saw a video of his last night. I watched it.
There's a young man in Belgium that honors them every year. There's a plaque, memorial at Saint-Vith
that's the one I showed at the beginning.
It's dedicated to them. No, there's a whole nother one that's
a different one. Okay.
And yeah, it's like, and those guys, I love the Europeans.
Well,
they honor our troops so much more than we do. It's
like we've talked about. I know you and I've talked about it. I think
and the South Koreans, they honor them so much more than we do. It aggravates me.
There's a young lady that I watch, and Brenda and I watch some of her videos now. She's a travel creator, but she's Dutch, and during COVID she was back home because she'd been in Africa or South America, and when COVID hit, she just barely managed to get back to Holland before everything locked down. And so while she was there, she got out and started doing some videos or vlogs around the Netherlands. And that was one of the things she did. She visited several Dutch or American cemeteries that are in Holland.
And they're immaculate.
They're immaculate. And she talked about just how important is to the Dutch people to this day. And like you said, South Koreans and there's just it's
They
amazing.
cut the grass with scissors, dude.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing.
The kids go out and cut the grass at those cemeteries with scissors. It's amazing. Anyway.
Yeah, if we don't, that's common. That's always bugged me about people who don't appreciate history at all. And I knew so many kids my age going to school and stuff, and I'm sure it's still this way today. Who just history's boring and it doesn't matter. It's what's done is done. It's in the past, but we're destined to repeat stuff. If we don't learn. If we don't learn from the past, we're going to do
Here
it over
again.
Human nature. All right.
All right, brother. I gotta go pull crawfish.
No, wait. 1 minute. 1 minute.
You get 1 minute.
I gotta show you.
Oh, you're gonna show me stuff you gathered. You're gonna have to turn that comment off. I can't see you.
Oh, all right. All right. Here's one.
In without knocking.
Yeah, that's that one.
That's probably one of my favorite Charlie Russells.
Here's the one I don't know the name of yet.
I don't know if I've seen that one.
There you get a better view of it.
Yeah, I see it. I mean, I don't know if
I've been looking for it. I've got several sites that have a whole bunch of his art listed and just laid out so you can look through them, see which one's what. I can't find this one.
That's pretty cool.
And then this one.
That might be worth $1 billion.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? I'll be honest with you, as much as I hate to
it's the only print that was ever made of that particular painting, and the original painting was burned up in a courthouse in Montana, and now you own the only copy of it.
If it's worth $1 billion, I'd probably sell it. I'd take a picture, get a copy of it, but I'd sell it. And this is the other one. This is the cinch ring or something.
Oh, yeah.
Or broken ring or something.
Broken cinch.
Yeah, broken cinch. That's the three. And
sweet.
So that's the three. I
those
saw
those three beauties that you managed to come away with from the.
I saw those, and I said, I gotta have.
Once your daughters finally let you know it was happening.
Yeah, that was one I just found out just in time, and because I'm serious, it was down to like an hour or two before the bidding ceased, and I got in on it, and I only had to make a couple of bids, and nobody else bid on them, so I got them, and for $23 or something for all three of those.
Sweet.
Two nicely woven baskets.
And think about the return on that $23. You're gonna make over $1 billion.
$1 billion. See this basket right here? That was in it.
Serious?
Yeah, which is a really nice round basket.
Your wife wants it.
Well, it's still out here. I don't know if she's gonna get it. But yeah, she's mentioned the fact that she might need to. Make yourself big. Oh, I didn't think that. I'm sorry. I could have made my print bigger. I could have showed them off better. And I'll do that. You got to go. Mark's got to go cook crawdads.
I got to go pull traps. I haven't even pulled traps yet.
Well, so you got to go pull the traps. My goodness, you're behind.
Busy.
Well, you enjoy yourself today or tomorrow. Whenever are you going to eat today?
Today.
So will you have time to purge them at all?
Huh?
Will you be able to purge them at all?
About 5 hours.
About 5 hours. Okay. And you guys have seen this in the past, I think. This is Mark's annual one of his annual, semi-annual, biannual, I don't know, crawdad bulls. And he's got.
If you want to be here, it's at 1,500 hours this afternoon.
So you're going to have to hurry.
So get on the fast mover and fly yourself out here. You can land at the Green River. The airport at Green River is literally called the Intergalactic Spaceport.
Is it really?
It really is.
Diana says she's on her way. Hey, Carol, hang around a minute. If you got a minute, I'm gonna after Mark leaves, I'm gonna make my thing bigger, and I'll show you these prints again.
I'm leaving.
All right, brother. Love you. Talk to you later.
All of you.
See ya
later.
Okay. Here, you guys can see these. I'll show these one more time. These are all by a gentleman by the name of Charlie Russell, who was a famous cowboy artist from Montana. And I don't know if you guys remember this. Mark has made a saddle for a guy that's a copy of Charlie Russell's saddle. And there's three Western artists that I've always liked, and this guy Russell, Frederick Remington, and George Catlin, who all three of them had something to do with the West, either the natives or the cavalry or the cowboys or whatever. Charlie Russell did a lot of both, but he did a lot of stuff that had cowboys in it or related. But he lived and painted right there in the state of Montana. And here's the last one. This is the one he was talking about. He likes. It's called "In Without a Knock." Basically, it's a bunch of cowboys riding their horses into the hotel saloon. I'm quite sure, uninvited, but apparently he saw some of this stuff done in real life and went on to paint it. So he's an interesting character in himself. One of these days, maybe I'll just do a story about him. So, Ian, I missed you coming in, buddy. Good to see you. Dave may be gone. I saw a couple of things. I was trying to catch up a little bit on chat, and I missed it. Always good to see you, Ian. I don't know if Tony's still in here. Dave may be gone. Carol, somebody said something to Dave, and that's what I was trying. That's what Mark, when I was distracted, I was trying to read something that somebody was saying to Dave, and I just didn't. There's Tony O'Tower. I don't know if you're still here, and if I know you, Tony, or if that's a different Tony. Either way, welcome in. Yeah, Brenda, if you think we can get in a car and get to Wyoming, we'll have lunch with the fam out there or dinner. They're going to have crawdads and corn on the cob and red potatoes and all that stuff cooked in a boil. And he's running behind because he was supposed to have those traps pulled last night. I thought probably because of the rain. It's probably why he didn't get them done. No, we didn't need a lot of humor for today. That's true, Ian. But I mean, it didn't. Mark has told me about his grandfather a couple of times, and I've been trying to find history about some of my family's military service, and it's really hard to find. I can't find my dad's yet. I'm sure when I'll figure it out. But some of my family's records, I believe, were in the St. Louis fire that burned the VA records. That fire was 20, 30 years ago or something or more. And I have a feeling that a lot of the stuff that I'm looking for might have been consumed by that fire. But so I'm still looking. But we were talking about that, and he was talking about his granddad, and he was telling me some of this. And I've heard most of it from him before, but I thought, it's been a good weekend to, honor something of a veteran. And that group, what I guess in some ways what notoriety they got was negative, and it wasn't really justified, I don't think. But war as hell, and literally, and bad things happen, and that they were just that particular those divisions were just they were just overrun, and then literally in the middle of the night it was too late. Did my wife leave? Is she saying bye to everybody? Yeah, she's saying goodbye to everybody. You just got here. Or at least I'm thinking you did. Anyway, I don't know. Has anybody got any more 4th of July weekend plans? I don't know if we're going to do anything. I contacted the girls yesterday, or maybe even Thursday afternoon or evening, and said, "Hey, guys want to get together and go have a picnic somewhere?" And as Brenda says, crickets. Didn't hear anything. Then finally said, "Well, maybe when." And then Kelly says, "Well, we've got plans for about all weekend, so we're going to maybe do something in a weekend or two from now. Maybe we're going to get together and go to the mountains. I'd like to go to the mountains and go find a place somewhere up there in the higher country where it's cooler by the creek, and who knows, maybe grill a hot dog or have potato salad. My wife makes really good potato salad." How far up north, Carol? When you say up north, to me, you live up north. So how much further up north do they go? Or did they go? How about Colorado, Ian? Is anything going on in Colorado for you? Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha, Ian. Ha ha ha. Our mountains aren't as tall as your mountains, buddy, but ours are older than yours are. Which is why ours aren't taller than yours now. Ours started out taller than yours. They just all wore down. That's fact. Look it up. The Appalachian mountain chains are like the oldest group of mountains left on the face of the earth. And they say at one time they were higher than the Himalayas, but that's how much erosion and time wears them down, which I never would have believed when I was growing up. You never could convince me. But our highest mountains our tallest mountain in the east is 6,000 something feet, and that's Black Mountain, and it's just across the state line. And the next one is Klingman's Dome, which is on the Tennessee side. Both of them in the area, basically the area of the Great Smoky Mountains and stuff. Oh, you did. I mean, I kind of figured you for that, Ian. Just working, sweating down here. Wish I could get up to the mountains. Are you what? You know what is the altitude where you're at, Ian? You're on the Front Range, right? But Mark doesn't live in the mountains, but he lives at over 7,000 feet, so it don't look like mountains, but it sure as heck is high. It just so happens that I really like our mountains. I've always been in love with our mountains. The thing I've always missed most when I moved to Florida was mountains. I used to tell my roommate who was from Florida, he never understood this. I used to tell him, I said, I get tired of not being able to look out the window and seeing something taller than me. And he couldn't understand why we would want to live any place where the roads went like this instead of just a straight line. 5,900 feet. Well, you're higher than we are. We're about 1,800 here at the house. Not quite high enough to really cool off. I know, Tina. They don't even have hills. Not to amount to anything. Tallest mountain in Florida, I believe, is still Space Mountain. Or not Space Mountain, but Big Thunder Mountain, I believe. And that seems like it's 180 feet tall. And that tells you something. Motorcycle people used to come down. They come up here to ride the tail of the dragon, is what it's known as. And it's 318. It's an 11-mile stretch of road from Tennessee to North Carolina, and it's 318 curves. And the story used to be ride Florida 318 miles and 11 curves, and that was interstate exit ramps. Oh, okay. Well, I guess that counts then, Carol. I think it's down the ride at Animal Kingdom. Oh, maybe. That could. Oh, you mean Everest? That could be. I know it's one of them. They used to talk about the three mountain ranges or three or four tallest mountains in Florida were all at Walt Disney World. I remember reading that somewhere a long time ago. And that's quite true, I'm sure. Like I said, I've been all over. There is part of Florida that's kind of northwest of Disney World, and they call it the. I've read someplace it was called the Lake District, or it's called the which is kind of silly because there's lakes all over Florida, or the Hill Country of Florida, and it's not. It's not. It's just less flat perhaps than everywhere else, but it's still not. It ain't much of a hill, and it's certainly not a mountain or mountains. Oh me. I don't know if you guys have ever know who William Lease Teat Moon is. I've probably talked about him before. He's an author that I really like. He wrote a book about Kansas. Yeah, Kansas. And where he talks about, it's called Prairie Earth is the name of the book. He talks about the Flint Hills of Kansas and the fact that if you could invert them and get, under the surface, that they go way deep into the surface and would be really tall mountains if they were upside down or inside out. Mount Dora. That is Mount Dora. I think Mount Dora. Yeah, I know where Mount Dora is. I've driven through Mount Dora, Ian. I believe Mount Dora is just to the north, maybe slightly northeast of. Well, I know it is northeast of Disney World, a little bit. I used to, when my buddy Phil and I'd go to Bike Week every year. A lot of times we'd stay somewhere on the east side of Orlando because it was so much cheaper there. We could drive 45 minutes to an hour to get to the beach every day and spend a lot less money than we could trying to, stay in Daytona Beach for Bike Week. And we used to go through Mount Dora as part of either route to get there or route to get to Daytona. I can't remember which. 108 feet above sea level. That's a high mountain, Tina. I'm thinking that's stretching things a whole lot. I tell you what, I got to thank you guys because I feel a lot better than I did when I started this show. I was not feeling that well. When I get through and you guys all leave me, I may get to feeling bad again. But right now, I feel better. If nothing else, my leg's not bothering me. So I don't know what my wife and I are going to get into. Brenda, are you still on here? Did you leave? I don't know. I may try to pack her up and see if we can't go. I don't know. We might go to Jonesboro. I don't know if we talked about that or not. She needs to go see her mom. We all bought shirts that said I climbed Mount Dora. Did you have to have those made in, or did they actually sell that in a local store somewhere? That's pretty funny. Well, we all got interested and didn't pay attention to our aches and pains. Yes, that's true, Tina. Which is good. Like I said, I woke up hurting all over. My back hurt, my shoulder hurt. I woke up laying. I know I've said this before. I've slept on the couch since I had my shoulder surgery. And last night I thought I'm going to lay down in bed for a little while. Oh, did I regret that this morning? I like to never got up. My shoulder was killing me. My back was hurting. Chamber of Commerce used to make them. Okay. It's a whole different topic. Or a little bit. We were talking about prisoner of war camps. I didn't realize until well, yesterday I got to reading about the Tennessee divisions that were in the Battle of the Bulge in that area, and there were several prisoner of war camps right here in good old Tennessee, and I didn't realize that. I knew there were several military facilities that were former Army bases or Air Force bases that are no longer here. It's kind of like Florida. You know, you go to Florida, and there's actually not little. There's, well, let's call them little, like county airports and stuff scattered all over the state of Florida. But they're huge, huge runways, 8,000 feet long and 250 feet wide, way bigger than anything you'd see in a small town around here or something, where a lot of times it's a single strip and it's narrow and, you know, maybe 5,000 feet long. And Florida was covered up with Air Force bases and aviation facilities during the war, and a lot of them are abandoned, but small towns and counties have reclaimed them and used them as airports. I'm sure there was some kind of program after the war when they started closing all that stuff down to you know, make them available to the general population. And it used to just fascinate me that you could walk. I'd fly over an airport that looked the size bigger than any commercial airport in Tennessee, and it was an abandoned airfield. You know, and there was one in every little county in Florida at one time. Yes, Tina, I'm pretty sure it was. You're right. And MCO, if somebody doesn't know, that's Orlando. Pretty sure it was a military base, and it may have. And I think it was one of those World War II bases. I'm not sure when it closed down. Tim is the big loop on Cades Cove Road in between Cherokee and Gatlinburg. Yes and no, Kay. It is actually, you could say it's between Gatlinburg and Cherokee, but it's actually south of there. There's a more direct route between Gatlinburg and Cherokee that goes right over the mountains. In Cades Cove, you got to go to the south end of the park and then come back up. So you can go down there and then come back up. The loop itself is not directly connected to any major roads. You have to go into that area and then come back out again if you want to, you know, get around to go across the mountains into Cherokee from there. But yeah, it's more or less in that way. But it's Cades Cove is actually southeast of Gatlinburg proper. I could probably just, you know, do something really silly like pop that up on a map real quick just to show you if you want to see. And no, I'm sure everybody's not as interested as I am, but I love maps, so I'll just show you on a map. Okay. Gatlinburg. Oh, I got to do this, don't I? Okay. Gatlinburg is right here. Cades Cove is actually down here, so it's almost as much. No, wait a minute. I got to back up a little bit. Laurel Falls, Manus Branch. Wow, why does this look weird? There's trim. I've got it blown up too big. That's why. Cades Cove is down in this part, Carol or K, and Cherokee. Gatlinburg's up here, and Cherokee is over here. Right here's Cherokee. So Cherokee is southeast of Gatlinburg, and Cades Cove is actually, if you made a triangle out of it, Cades Cove would be at the other tip of the triangle. Oh, we used to love to go to the loop. Okay, we used to go and do the loop at least 2 or 3 times a year. And for a while, we used to take our bicycles. Brenda and I and the girls used to take our bicycles up there and ride 2 or 3 weekends every summer or every year, you know, depending on when we were in the mood to go up there. When we first moved back to Knoxville, the Knoxville area, we hiked in the park a lot and spent a lot of weekends. I used to drive up to, in fact, I used to drive down to Cage Cove on any given morning that I wasn't in class. It's when I was going back to school, and take pictures because I could. There's Tremont. This map. There's Cage Cove. Okay, here's Cage Cove, actually, Kay. And it's all that cleared area. Part of it, it's within this cleared area, which is real. I mean, that's how much that was all farmland before the park was created. And there were people living in there until I think sometime in maybe the late 90s when the last family died out that was still in there. Neat place. If you've never been, I'm sure a lot of you guys have been down this part of the world. May already know that, but Cage Cove is really worth your time if you ever get a chance. And it's I don't know how crowded it is now. Traffic had gotten pretty bad, and they've talked about restricting traffic in there. Of course, everybody gets all up in arms when they talk about doing that, but traffic had gotten so bad that it was hard to get through there. We used to try, if you wanted to ride your bicycle through there, we used to try to be up there by like 7 a.m. so we could ride around before all the traffic got in. Is Diana leaving or is she already gone? Thank you, Diana. Say hi to Mike. I don't know if he came in or not. Where I was born is still one of the few where any plane flying can land. Oh, you mean the airport was big enough? Gotcha. There's a bunch of those. And where was that, Tina? Was that Florida? Or are we talking about New York? Because like I said, there's some huge airports, runways, all over Florida. It's amazing. Or it used to be. It used to fascinate me anyway. Let's see here. Can I zoom in here without making everybody sick to their stomach? This is actually the loop road. See if there's this Cage Cove loop road that goes all the way around through here. And then it hooks back around down this way. And then slowly but surely it starts turning its way back up and goes back up into town. This is the way back out right here. One way for 12 miles. The only shortcuts, there's a couple, that Hyatt Lane, which is this road right here, and one other one, or some cut across. That's it. Otherwise, you're stuck for the whole trip, if you will. Rome, New York. Okay. Was that a base, Tina, or were they building planes up there? I mean, some of these bases were for training. Some of them were where they stored planes as they were ferrying them across the Atlantic. I used to think it was silly. A lot of stuff bounces across the northern Atlantic route, but some go from like Florida over to the Azores and then into Spain, which is or North Africa, which was another way they moved airplanes over during the war. Did anybody say my wife answered when I asked if she was still in here? She must have left. I just had a really great idea. I think I'm going to see if she wants to go have lunch somewhere. There's a little restaurant that I found up in the country here I've been wanting to go check out. We might just go do that today. If we don't go to Jonesboro. I need to ask her if she wants to go to Jonesboro. We are sort of planning to go to our 50th high school reunion, which is at the end of next month. And I was just talking to one of my other buddies that I went to high school with last night, and he's thinking about coming down. He's in Indiana. He's thinking about coming down and going to it. Neither one of us have ever. I think he went to one. I think he went to the 10th anniversary reunion after we graduated. Brenda and I have never been back to any. So I thought, well, hell, let's go to the 50th. That may be the last time we ever get to go to one. If I make it that long. I told him last night, I said, I don't know whether I'm wanting to go out of curiosity or I just want to see how many of us are left. And, of course, that's 2 months from now. I may not make it either. Who knows? Donaldson Central. Trying to think where that is. The guy I was just talking about, Kay, he was based down there somewhere in the Air Force. I'm trying to think of the name of the town where he was at. I want to say Sumter, and that's not right. That's a whole other fort. At least I think. I don't think there's another Fort Sumter. Anyhow, Black Mountain is Ian. Are you still here? Oh, I'm not ready to quit. That don't mean time won't run out, Ian. We're talking about tall mountains. Black Mountain. I was going to see if I could point out Black Mountain. Black Mountain, North Carolina, is the tallest peak east of the Rockies, east of the Mississippi, and east of the Rockies. And Klingman's Dome, which is inside the park, it is right in this area. This road, 441, crosses the mountains. Klingman's Dome is right up in here. Okay, surely it's marked. Newfound Gap. Where is Klingman's? Wow, I'm embarrassed by my lack of ability this morning to find things. I've been to these places bazillion times. Some of my favorite places in the whole world to go to. Or used to be, anyway. Anyway, Newfound Gap, which is right here at the state line. That's Newfound Gap is the gap that goes between Tennessee and North Carolina. You cross over. I had a flat tire there on one of my motorcycles a few years ago. I had to call and get somebody to come all the way up there to pick me up. First time and only time I ever had to use that special insurance you can get, that you don't think you'll ever have to use in case you ever break down. Boy, it paid off that day. Saved me a ton of money having to pay a tow truck. Okay, I'm looking for a peak. Bear with me. Close your eyes for a minute. Well, why can I not find Klingman's Dome? Kind of funny story. There used to be a great. It's right there. Oh, you know what? They've changed the name of it. I forgot they've changed it to a Cherokee name. And I I'll butcher if I try to say it. But anyway, that's it. It's 5,800 and something feet, I believe. Or maybe, no, it's just 6,000 and something. And like I said, the other one is Black Mountain, and it's just a little over that by a few feet. And they used to joke about it. There used to be an argument about which one was taller, and people literally used to pile rocks up on top. People would go to the top of the mountain and they'd carry a rock in their pocket or in their backpack, and they'd put it on the stack. And there's a cairn up there on I believe it's on the side trail on Clingman's, where people would pile rocks up trying to raise that, get that elevation up just a little bit more. Your bosses frown upon you for closing your eyes at work. That's the funny thing about bosses, Ian. They do that. Was he leaving? Sorry, Ian, if I missed you, buddy. All right, Tina. I got to head out too. I need to shut up. I need to find out what Brenda wants to do the rest of the day, and I need to let everybody else get going. Or I could just stay on here and just talk to myself the rest of the day. I could do that. I'll probably turn everything off, and I'll stay here and talk to myself anyway. So there you go. Anyway, thanks, guys. Appreciate everybody being here. Hope we didn't bore you too much to death. And look forward to being back again next week. Everybody have a great rest of your 4th of July / Canada Day weekend. And, see you again next week. Bye-bye.